Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Homes and Safe Communities, our Scrutiny Committee on Wednesday, the 12th of July, 6 p.m. May I remind everyone present that the meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording archived for future viewing. Could all participants please mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking? If a participant wishes to speak, can they please put their hand up if they can be seen on screen, or use the raise hand function. If a participant raises their hand via the function and is not subsequently invited to speak by the chair, please could they turn their camera on to indicate or place a message in the chat function. When invited to address by the chair, please could all participants ensure that their microphone and camera is on to ensure that they can be seen and heard when actively participating. If this is not possible for any reason, please bring this to the attention of the chair and/or Democratic Services Officer as soon as possible. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function. For the sake of the recording, the chat function may be used to highlight any technical issues and/or to grab the attention of the chair or Democratic Services Officer. If any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard or seen when they are addressed in the committee, then they should let the chair or Democratic officer know. Okay. Agenda item, do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes,
Chair.
we do, Chair. Sorry, Chair.
Sorry, Mum. No.
No, if I go mine, if there's additional ones, sorry, Vice Chair. I'm just going to say, had apologies from Councillor Perks, Mr. Dutch, and Mrs. Smith from the tenant representatives as well. Sorry, Vice Chair, you're going to say.
No, Mark, thank you. It was only to give Councillor Perks apologies. Yeah.
Okay. Any other apologies? Okay. Agenda item 2 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of June, 2023. Are we happy with those minutes?
Happy to note, Chair.
Okay. Okay, so move and note. Are we happy with that? Okay, Councillor Aviat, you have your hand up. You're muted.
Sorry, I'm jumping the gun. It's for the next item. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. The next item then is declarations of interest. Councillor Aviat.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to declare interest in items 4 and 5. Personal interest, not prejudicial, as I'm a council tenant. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Hennessy.
Exactly the same, please.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Aviat, did you want to come back in? No. Okay. Okay, so agenda item 4 is the reports of Director for Environment and Housing, and it's the closure of accounts 2022 to 23. If you'd like to take it away, Laura.
Thank you, Chair. Evening, everyone. Closure of accounts 22-23. The purpose of this report is to inform committee of the provisional final position on the revenue budgets for 2022-23. I say provisional as the final accounts are yet to be audited by Audit Wales. The report includes an executive summary highlighting the council-wide year-end position, whilst the detail relating to this committee is outlined from paragraph 2.7 of the report. In summary, the council dealt with inflationary pressures on contracts and pay, as well as COVID-19 impact, and there have been significant demand pressures on homelessness, children's services, and pupils with additional learning needs. Despite these pressures, the year-end position was a balanced budget after drawing down a net 17 million from reserves. The sum of 1.89 million, the resulting balance after transfers to and from reserves at year end, was transferred into various corporate reserves. Looking in more detail at budgets relevant to this committee, the Youth Offending Service outturned with a favourable variance of £167,000 due to a rates rebate and staff vacancies. Regulatory services broke even following a £58,000 transfer into the Neighbourhood Services Reserve. This was mostly due to a repayment to this base budget for the Vale share of the 21-22 shared regulatory service end spend. Council Fund Housing break even following £2.4 million transfer into the Homelessness and Housing Strategy Reserve. This included 1.49 million for refugee resettlement. This was possible due to additional funding received during the year from Welsh Government and the Home Office for supporting people and refugee resettlement schemes. Private housing or disabled facilities grants, £2,000 adverse variance after a planned £41,000 had been drawn down from reserves for an occupational therapist post within the team. And the HRA, the Housing Revenue Account, outturned with a £954,000 deficit, whereas the revised budgeted deficit was £16.5 million. The reason the actual is so much lower is due to the fact that less funding than had been budgeted for revenue contributions to capital were needed, as capital spend was less than originally budgeted. For the same reason, the year-end balance on the Housing Revenue Reserve is higher than planned. There were efficiency targets of £500,000 set council-wide for 22-23, as well as £170,000 still being outstanding from 21-22, which are being monitored. Savings targets totaling £7,000, quite a modest sum, were set and achieved for services relevant to this committee in 22-23, and they're outlined on Appendix 2. As part of preparation for 22-23 budgets, a review of reserves was undertaken and some reallocation has been made to ensure that they more accurately reflect key budgetary risks. And see Table 11 for the updated list of corporate reserves, including the Homelessness and Housing Reserve. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any questions? I'm guessing not. Thank you, Laura. Agenda item 5 is the capital closure of accounts of 2022.
Sorry, Chair. Just to say, before we move on to the next agenda item, just to check that yourself and the committee are happy to note the 2 recommendations.
Told you it had been a long day. Yes. Are we happy to go with the recommendations to inform the number 1 is inform committee of the outturn and the financial measures taken and proposed, and to note the allocation of the 2022-23 surplus to support the delivery of schemes supporting key priorities identified by the council? Are we happy
to note
with those recommendations?
No, we move.
Okay.
Move that we note. Sorry.
Okay, Councillor Hanks. You're muted, Councillor Hanks.
I was just happy to endorse that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So agenda item 5 then is the capital closure of accounts 2022-23. Okay, Laura, back to you.
Okay, thank you. As with the revenue report, this report details the provisional final budgetary position on the capital programme for 22-23, and any slippage mentioned in the report has been approved under emergency powers. It's requested that members note this report. The council-wide year-end position on the capital programme was an underspend of £1.677 million on an adjusted budget of £82.4 million. The position for this committee's budget was an overspend of just over £1 million on an adjusted final budget of £22.5 million. This is detailed in Appendix 1. The overspend position just reflects the fact that more budget had previously been slipped forward than had been necessary, so approval is being given to reverse an element of that slippage back into 22-23, and the approved slippage amounts for this committee are listed in Appendix 3. Also highlighted in the report is the success story of the development of new homes for social rent, at Lawn of Felin Wynt at Hayes Road, consisting of 19 two-bed houses and 4 three-bed houses. Thank you.
Okay, any questions? Councillor Lovelock-Edwards?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's actually a comment on that very point. So can I refer you, Laura, is it to page 6 of the report where you reference the housing improvement plan? And it's so good to see that from our council in terms of the social housing that's been implemented. And I cannot stress how important it is right now, especially as today we've seen that up to around 40% of private landlords are likely to consider selling up because of the cost of living crisis and the impact. So I just wanted to reinforce or to put a comment on record as how vital this house building programme has been, and long may it continue through the Vale Council, and to thank staff and to thank Laura for the report as well.
Oh, okay, Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report, Laura. It's just a quick one. It's in relation to paragraph 2.2, which states that outturn for the Scrutiny Committee was recorded at 23.542 million. I was just wondering if we could have a breakdown of that figure in future reports by directorate. I'm just conscious that obviously housing accounts for some 22,369. Now, I'm assuming the rest of that figure comes from other directorates, so it's difficult to actually decipher from the report exactly where those figures are arrived at, if that makes sense. I was just wondering if that could be provided.
Hello, it does make sense. The unfortunate thing for Homes and Safe Communities Scrutiny is that the budgets are, as you say, scattered across various directorates. So it's not easy necessarily to pick them out. I'm just scrabbling, forgive me, I'm trying to find the appendix. I'm hoping Appendix 1 does split it out, does it? Yeah, Appendix 1
does, yeah.
hopefully
Oh, I'm dreadfully
should show
sorry.
you
For
that.
some reason that
No,
didn't
it's
load
fine.
on my I haven't got the appendix in front of me. That would explain it.
That's fine. That's fine. But you're right. It is quite disjointed.
No,
with
that's
this
fine.
committee,
I've
but
got it. Thank
they
you so
are there.
much.
No
Thanks.
problem.
Okay, any further questions on that or comments? Okay, well, thank you, Laura. Thank you. Thank you for this, and thank you, team, for us as well. Another wonderful report. We are now looking at the recommendations. Are we happy to accept the recommendations for this? Just getting back to them. It's my page. The recommendations to inform the committee of the year-end capital position for financial year 22-23. The committee to inform committee of additional schemes added to the approved programme for 22-23. Yeah.
Sorry, those are the reasons, recommendations. The recommendations are immediately above, but they're 4 ones for noting essentially. Sorry, Chair, just to be clear.
Yeah. Apologies. As I say, it's been a long week already in work. That committee, the recommendations, there are 4. The committee note the year-end capital position for financial year 22-23. The committee note the additional scheme budgets are set out in Appendix 1. Committee notes the summary position of the changes at the capital programme by directorate from approval at Council on 7th of March 22 to 31st of March 23, as set out in Appendix 2, and that committee note the emergency power approved in respect of the slippage as set out in Appendix 3. Are we happy with this?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I think I heard somebody second that then. Yes.
Seconded.
Okay, thank you. So agenda item 6 is the annual delivery plan monitoring report, Q4 performance. Okay.
I'll take that, Millie.
If
If that's
yes,
okay.
thank you, Miles.
Chair, thank you.
Welcome
So,
back. We've
yes, I haven't been for a while.
known you for a while.
Yeah, I'm not sat in a penthouse as a backdrop. Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to present this report. I will be ably supported by my housing colleagues who are here. So this is the annual delivery plan monitoring report for Q4 for 22-23. So I'll try and make some sense of the huge amount of paperwork you've got there. So essentially we have a corporate plan, you're all aware, which is the council's 5-year business plan. And the annual delivery plan is a 1-year snapshot of our performance against that plan. So essentially we measure our progress by looking at performance measures, and they're in the report termed as measures. And we also look at actions. And the actions are in service plans, and the service plans are service specific. So essentially, we put those two together, and we get a performance figure from that. So if I ask committee first, just to look at the report, and in particular, bullet point 6 in the executive summary, which relates to the work of this committee, and this mentions the planned activities and the actions that I just talked about. So in relation to planned activity for this committee, 95%, so 52 out of the 55 actions were attributed as green, and the final 5% were attributed as red. And at the 17 measures, the measures are measures of performance, 71%, 12 were attributed green, and 6% 1 amber, 23% 4 were attributed red. So in terms of our performance as a committee, we have 3 actions in the red and 4 measures in the red. So that is deemed as good performance. And it's been a very difficult time, in particular for house building, and I'll take you through a bit of the details of that when we put up the red areas where we have slightly underperformed. So if I can ask Mark, if you could just put the presentation up, if you wouldn't mind.
Bear with me a second, Miles. I'll just bring it up now.
So what we try to do is put all that information into a sort of easily readable format. So we've got a brief PowerPoint presentation with a couple of slides for you to look at.
Okay, just to check, Miles, that's the Appendix A. Is that
Appendix A. Sorry,
yeah.
I could have done that myself. Couldn't I? It's very lazy of me. Appendix
Bear
A.
with
Yeah.
me a second. I'll just bring that up. Hoping that's come up.
That's it. Cheers,
Yeah.
Max. So in terms of what we're asking from committee this evening, we're asking you to consider the Q4 results and any remedial actions that we put forward in respect of those areas where we've slightly underperformed. So we can move on to the next slide, please, Mark.
Sorry, bear with me a second.
That's it. So in tabular form there, you can see the 4 objectives in the corporate plan. The first block relates to actions, and the second block relates to measures. They've been termed PIs there, and the last block then is an average of the two. So you can see there's a couple of reds and an amber in there, a couple of ambers in there, but the general performance has been averaged out as green, and those are in the box on the far right hand side. So if you can go down one again, please. Thank you. So I'm not going to talk you through all these, but these are just a few of the things we've achieved under the objectives in the corporate plan. So I'll just draw out one few. Objective 2, the council house building programme continues to offer opportunities for work experience and apprenticeships. So as well as building houses, we're also giving opportunities to people to further their training and development. We talk about the one-stop shop there. And the 239 tenancies maintained 6 months after receiving money advice. So one of the most important teams we got working in such challenging times at the moment is our money advice team. And I really only ever hear good things about that team. So just a snapshot of some of the things we've achieved under the 4 corporate plan objectives. So next slide, please, Mark. And there's a snapshot, as I mentioned. So 3 actions in the red and 4 measures in the red. So in terms of the numbers of actions and measures we've got, very good performance, I would suggest. Next slide, please, Mark. So some areas for improvement based on some of those issues where we think that we haven't performed as well as we should have. So under objective 1, you can see the second bullet point about the construction industry. We are still struggling in terms of the pressures from the pandemic and the cost of living and the issues worldwide. So that's having a knock-on effect with materials and labour. And one you'll see one of our red areas is where we've not built as many houses in the time that we'd hoped to. You all know about Jehu sadly discontinuing their business partway through the Hayes Road scheme. So we had to pick that one up. That's another reason why that one's slightly delayed. So it's been a really challenging time for the commercial sector as well as ourselves. So there's just a few of the items there we're looking to improve on. And they're right across the whole scrutiny committee structure. So last slide, please, Mark. So what I'll do now, so what I said before was about the measures and actions where we've got red. So I'll just take you through these. So one of the actions where we've not performed where we'd like to have, and you can see the quarters in the year there, is the maximising the house build. So there's commentary there in terms of the numbers we have in build at the moment. And I've been on this council 40 years, and I remember when we didn't build anything, and when we did build back, pre-80s. So whilst our aspirations were high, our building over the last 3 years has been phenomenal. The number of properties we provided, but because of the problems we had with the likes of Jehu and other production issues related primarily to the commercial sector, was slightly behind where we'd like to be, but still I hope the committee will agree an excellent performance in terms of what we have done over the period. So can you scroll down a bit further, please, Mark?
Oh, bear with me, sorry, I've gone too far. I'll just go back down again, bear with me.
Yeah, so next one is green links, relates to this committee as well. Slightly under where we'd like to be. We talk about the local transport funding bus stop improvement scheme, and if you travel by bus, you will see that the electronic displays are now featuring on many of our bus stops and providing real-time information to people who are using the public transport network. So it's a very valuable scheme, our public transport veil scheme. So slightly underperforming, but not by much. So I don't think I would read too much into that. The next item on the community investment strategy is in draft. And I spoke to Nick this morning on this, should be coming to this committee hopefully after recess. There's been a lot of work done on that. We have one already, this is an update of that strategy, so you'll be seeing that shortly. Just scroll down a bit further, please, Mark. And these are green. So these were previously performing red at the third quarter, but the fourth quarter they're performing green. So if we keep going a bit further down, you'll get to the performance measures. Okay, first one, really important one for us, and one we're very disappointed about is our turnaround of void properties. We all know as a committee how important this is. So we're slightly behind where we'd like to be, and there's an explanation of why that is, but we're still in the upper quartile for organisations of our size. So my colleagues may be able to say we're performing better since the end of last year, but I haven't had the data for the first quarter yet. So slightly behind where we'd like to be. So 20.2 days as opposed to 20 days. But, I've seen that figure be as high as 60 days over the years gone by. So still a really good performance. And as I say, still in the upper quartile, but it's something we strive to bring down, because obviously the longer those houses are without tenants in them, the more tenants are waiting for them. So it's a key for us. And I know it's certainly a key for the cabinet member. So scroll down again, please, Mark. Okay, Now these next three relate primarily, the first two certainly, to this issue of the commercial sector and a slower build than we'd hoped. So they're linked to the first one. So we hope this will rectify itself as our partnership with Waits develops further. And if anyone's driven past Hayes Road recently, you'll see how close it is to completion. It looks like a fantastic scheme. So a lot of this delay is caused by issues out of our control in the building sector. But as I say, hopefully these will rectify themselves. But interest rates and things like this are always a factor on build, and they're a factor on how much we can build, how many houses we can build, because obviously the prices go up. So we are very much in the hands of what's happening commercially. So this reflects that. And lastly, the prevention of homelessness. The pressures on our homelessness team are enormous. And whilst we've not quite hit our target, I have to commend them on the work that they do, because it under severe pressure, trying to house everybody that's in need. So whilst we haven't quite hit our performance, that's in no way a reflection of the performance of the team. That they're doing an excellent job, and now the arrow is pointing up because that service is improving. So Chair, that's it. It's a snapshot of where we are. We're quite critical of ourselves because we're aspirational, but hopefully committee will see that as regards the numbers of actions and measures we had, to be slightly failing on a small number like that is pretty good for the team, and I'm certainly not taking credit for that. There's a couple on the call that could, but not me. But Chair, we'll take any questions. As I said, I got Nick and Mike here if there's any specific housing committee questions, but we would welcome any questions that the committee has on the Q4 performance.
Okay. Thank you for that, Miles. Certainly informative, and I must ask you to pass our thanks and congratulations on to your team, because they have been working hard. They are facing some real pressures at the moment, and that they've been doing really well in the face of these pressures. I did have a question regarding the green links and the bus stops. There was a meeting of the Vale Glamorgan 50+ Forum on the 13th of June, am I right?
I believe there was, yeah.
What was the outcome of that? And anything come up that would help with that at all?
I wasn't there, Chair, but I can certainly get an answer for you in terms of what happened at that meeting. But I wasn't at. I don't know whether there were any elected members who were at that meeting.
Councillor Lovelock was just putting her hands up. I'm assuming you were there. Were you, Belinda?
Yeah, I was wearing my Older People's Champions hat on, so okay. I can tell you it was well attended. There was quite a lengthy discussion around the current issue with regard into the ending of the COVID emergency services funding. However, the officers there were able to talk about some of the wider elements of transport in the Vale and focus on moving forward some of the issues that I think the forum had been raising previously. It was a really positive meeting, and whilst there are challenges and there are concerns, obviously, from that diverse group of people, there was a lot of support for what the officers are doing, and in fact they were invited back at the next meeting, so it couldn't have been all bad, Miles.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for that, Belinda. Okay, I can see we do have a few people who have questions, so I'll go in the order they've come on the list here. Councillor Campbell.
Hello. So we obviously mentioned about bus stops, and it's really good that the targets are being hit about improving the bus stops. But we've all kind of seen that obviously the funding's being pulled back from Welsh Government. So if we're starting to improve bus stops, but actually we've got no buses running to these bus stops, doesn't it become just a bit of a box ticking exercise, and therefore a bit of a waste of money to improve bus stops because we haven't actually got buses going there? I mean, we've mentioned Hayes Road a couple of times, but we've got this nice, lovely estate. I work just around the corner from this estate, and we've all seen in the press that, the bus that goes there, which is the only the only public transport going to this area, is going to be stopped. So I just as much as it's fantastic that we are hitting targets for getting, public transport and the bus stops, improved so that more people can use them, it becomes a bit of a moot point if we haven't actually got buses going there. So as a council, what are we doing to actually start to improve our public transport links so that when we actually start to spend money and do these projects, that these things are actually being used? We've actually got companies coming and actually using these facilities to actually, make them viable.
Yeah, Chair's a fair point. I think that it's the chicken and egg really for us. Whilst we control the stops because they're on the highway, we don't control whether the bus companies will actually use the routes or not. If they don't think they're commercially viable, other than the fact that we could subsidise them. So we're heavily reliant on what we get from Welsh Government in terms of support funding, but we're not going to be not doing bus stops because we think Welsh Government may not fund. If the routes are still used by pedestrians, by bus users, then we will put the stops on them. Should we, if we know that the route's going to be discontinued and it's not really much of a chance of it ever being put back on, then it would be foolish spending. But I'm not aware that we're in that situation. We're certainly still working with Welsh Government on the funding elements for each route, and as soon as we have that and we're in touch with the bus companies as well, we'll release that. But yeah, it's a fair point. We wouldn't want to waste money, but neither do we want to give up and say, well, because it's not being properly funded, we're never going to have a bus on that route again. If you're a big believer in public transport, as I am, and active travel, then we should be moving more people onto the bus, not less. So keep the infrastructure up well, keep it functioning properly. If Welsh Government don't fund the bus system sufficiently, then we'll have to review where these bus stops are. But I am still hopeful that the majority of the routes we operate will still operate. We don't know that as yet, but it's a very good point, Councillor Campbell. But we need to make sure our infrastructure is ready for the routes, and we don't want something to be thrown back at us and say, well, actually, there's no bus stops on that route, or the infrastructure isn't right anyway, so that's a good enough reason to discontinue it. So it's a fair point, but we will continue striving to increase as many bus routes as possible with the funding that we have. But we're trying to make the experience better for bus passengers, even if the routes are infrequently used, by putting the technology in.
Yeah. Thanks, Miles. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of say if there's anything that as a council we can do to encourage people to use more public transport and to encourage companies to kind of use these routes better, because obviously we're upholding our end of the bargain, so to speak, by putting better infrastructure in place. If we can encourage more people to use these routes and encourage more companies to come into these routes, it stops it being this kind of moot point of, a little bit of a box ticking exercise for us.
Yeah, again, a good point, because when I've been involved with routes that have been potentially to be discontinued or have been discontinued, you get a large outcry from the residents, and often it's a handful of people, and you're thinking there's so many people could use this route, and they don't. So it does disproportionately affect the vulnerable, doesn't it? Those that haven't got other means of travel. But we do need to encourage, the likes of myself and others who are fit and able and have a car to leave the car there and do something else, and that's the key. We're not quite at that point, are we, where we're shifting car drivers away from their cars into public transport. We will be at some point in the future, and I will do what we can through our public transport team to encourage public transport. And when we do know what the routes are going to be, the supported routes and those that we fund, we'll make a big splash about that within the press and social media. And as part of that, we'll be encouraging the use of public transport. But if you can do that as well as local members, can't you? If you do get the opportunity, I guess.
Yeah. Now I have actually been in touch with people regarding the 88 bus, that one from Hayes Road. Purely, it's in my ward. I've had several phone calls about it. I have been in touch with people. I do know things are in works. I do know that there are some backup plans being looked at, possibly tweaking other routes to cover it, that sort of thing. But there's nothing been set in stone at the moment, because it is depending basically on the funding that is being withdrawn from by the Welsh Government. So there are options, but nothing finalised yet. I went down there on the weekend, actually, before I went to London for a few days. I was down there on the weekend talking to residents about this and having a photo taken for a press release about it. But as I say, I do know there are some things in the works, but nothing set in stone as yet.
Can I say,
Okay.
Chair, as well, we will be looking at our green link service, depending on
Yeah.
what services are dropped and what service demand there is. We'll be looking whether there's an opportunity for our green link service to fill in those gaps.
I do think that's a very good idea, purely because there's a lot of people rely on that 88 bus to go to some hospital appointments, go to the hospice, because it serves the T Haven Hospice. You know, it's not too far from there. There's a lot of people who rely on it that don't drive. Okay, so we do need to put something in place. Councillor Lloyd Selby.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Miles, for that really helpful presentation on the issues that are particularly relevant to this committee. I want to make a couple of comments and ask a question, if I may. So, first of all, to commend the work that's been done, particularly by the Money Advice team. I mean, they have clearly been under significant pressure because of cost of living issues, which sit outside the remit of this council. But I know that means they've been busier than ever. And I think you referenced the positive feedback that the council receives in relation to their work, and that's certainly been something that I've seen firsthand. As the pressure has increased on them, they've responded to that remarkably well. And also the casework that comes into my inbox focuses significantly on people who are facing homelessness. And as Councillor Lovelock Edwards mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, again, external pressures, decisions that are made outside of this council are resulting in decisions being made by landlords, which will potentially continue to bring enormous pressure on the council in terms of the numbers of people who are seeking support around housing. So obviously that's going to be front and centre for us in the coming months, recognising that pressure. But it is important to acknowledge the work that's being done by those teams under incredibly difficult circumstances. So thank you for that. And then my question relates to the building programme. Again, I want to say I think it's admirable that the council has actually been able to pick up the consequences of the really sad demise of Jehu, a long-standing Welsh business firm that's done great work across the region for decades. So really sad to see them not being able to trade again, but great to see that development on Hayes Road coming to completion. In terms of some of the schemes that are due to come online next year, all things being equal, given the volatility in the market, which we all need to acknowledge, and as I said already, cost of living pressures which sit outside our control, does it look like those schemes are going to be delivered on time, or are you already anticipating some pressures around that?
I'm not aware of any, but Mike is on the call, so perhaps I'll defer to Mike to see if because I know we've got the new partnership, which obviously is going to give us a greater flexibility and more resilience. So I know that Mike can answer that.
Yeah, Councillor Lloyd Selby, no, we're not anticipating at this stage any particular concerns or issues with the programme for next year. There are a couple of things that we are looking at. Miles has mentioned the housing partnership that we are looking to enter into with Cardiff to streamline process, improve procurement practice, which will obviously speed up. The intention is to speed up and to accelerate the programme. Because of that critical mass of being able to attract perhaps larger builders that we have had difficulty in attracting. We've talked there around Jehu and Hayswood Road. There were only 2 contractors that came forward when we tendered for that contract. Jehu were one, and there was another contractor that no longer exists either. With the other. So I think part of the issue is the critical mass. Our schemes are significant for us, but they're not huge. They're not sort of in the same ballpark as major house builders would be attracted to necessarily. And even then, I'm not saying we would want to go with the major house builders, given some of the issues that we see day in, day out, colleagues across the council in dealing with those. One of the things that we've looked at and was particularly successful at Hayswood Road was that we are building those properties ourselves. We engaged you may recall, we've engaged a management company, so we've appointed a management company. One of the advantages of that is that we're actually dealing directly with the subcontractors, the roofers, the brickies, and everyone is local that's working on that. So in terms of circular economy, we're particularly pleased that that scheme is not only building essential council housing, it's also providing money into the local economy of the Vale of Morgan as well. Which I think is equally important for us. So in summary, no, we're not anticipating any significant issues. The partnership programme will take some time to evolve because we will have to go through a formal procurement route in order to attract a development partner, for example. So that will be some time down the road. I think the major obstacle for us going forward is land acquisition. And even though that won't affect next year, it is a concern for us looking forward, and we're actively going to be in the market to acquire land, and clearly the work that's coming through the revised LDP and increased opportunities there for development will be something that we will be extremely mindful of. And working with Welsh Government and other partners, public sector bodies who are landowners, and working with those partners to bring forward and accelerate potentially development on land that we don't currently own. But as I say, in summary, no, I'm not concerned at this stage, but we will have to acquire land going forward in order to continue with our programme and accelerate it going forward.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Really helpful update and reassuring.
Okay, Councillor Aviat.
Mike, this is just a question about void properties. When I took on my council property, it was like all the colours of the rainbow: lime green, purple, orange, black. And the council gave me, I moved in, the council gave me pots of paint and brushes. Wouldn't that be quicker to get people in to do their own decorated rather than waiting for us to sort it out?
So Nick will probably explain in more detail, but pots of paint and paint packages we've moved forward from. We are decorating habitable rooms now within void properties ourselves, which has contributed to some of the delays, quite frankly. And even though it's only a couple of days, but we are, as part of our void standard, we are improving properties so that they are movable into without great difficulty. One of the things we're also waiting for, as you're aware, is WHQS 22 or 23, whatever it's called, going forward, where local authority, as part of that standard, will also be required to carpet or to floor our void properties prior to relet. Now that will have some challenges because that we will obviously will have to pay for that. However, it's one of the main cost issues, isn't it, for any new tenant moving into a property, the cost of carpeting or flooring a property, particularly for young families. You know, and we've seen situations, I'm sure, where the tenants have moved into properties without any carpeting or flooring material, and the associated issues that provides to families and children. So the standard has moved on. Nick, if there's anything to add there, please jump in terms of the paint standard. But as far as I'm aware, we have moved from pots of paint being delivered and a second economy that we used to have as well, because not all the paint used to be used in the painting of the property, as I recall. But we actually are doing that work now. Nick, I don't know if there's anything you wish to add.
Yeah, just a brief point, if that's okay, Chair, because Mike, you're absolutely right in terms of the paint packs, and you know, some people quite kind of like getting stuck in and decorating their property, but a lot of the feedback we had sometimes is that people were very vulnerable, you know, moving out of temporary accommodation, hotels, maybe single mums with kids, maybe older people, not, you know, having access to things like ladders and things like that, because the paint packs are fairly basics, rollers, etc. So we do the habitable rooms now, but what we do also do as well, we do have with Crown Paint, we issue vouchers there for Crown Paint, so people can actually choose what colours that they want, or what up to a value really, so they can redeem those for various equipment to help them to get properties up to a standard that they're happy with really. So it's just a balance, I suppose, isn't it, between getting the property back as quickly as we can, but not setting somebody up to fail right at the beginning, really, because there's so much to think about. You know, your stuff is in storage, trying to sort out utilities, carpeting, furniture, trying to get yourself, you know, the painting on top of that. You know, to redecorate a 3-bedroom house is, you know, from top to bottom is a significant task. You know, I've got first-hand experience a little while back, and it took me weeks to do the job, and still had more paint on me than on the walls. So yeah, it works for some people, but not for everyone. But our approach at the moment, you know, we get the painters, the professionals to do it, but there is sometimes some paint packs so people can put their own stamp on places.
Councillor Avia, you've got your hand back up. Did you want to come back in?
Yes, sorry. We've gone to the flooring and everything. I mean, a lot of the older properties, we've got chipboard, you know, it's like Weetabix. Is there anything in the future to improve our flooring for the people who've moved in a long time ago? Because it just falls through. You know, if it gets wet, people fall through their ceilings. Is there anything for, you know, to remove chipboard flooring in the old properties?
What I'd say, Councillor Avia, is if tenants are finding that there is repairs required to their flooring, then report those repairs, because we would be required to repair damaged floorboarding, or in the circumstance that you say, where the chipboard has become waterlogged and saturated, then certainly we would want to be repairing or replacing in that instance. So all I can say is that if there are situations you become aware of, please ask your tenants to report those to us, and as I say, we will attend to repair.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Lovelock-Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. Again, this is around a couple of points, but the first one is around void properties, but from a different perspective. And I note in the report, Miles, that there's been quite a significant increase in the amount of money that it's costing the council in terms of repairs, and a number of properties that are now deemed as requiring major works. So taking into consideration some of the comments in Laura's report with regards to an increase in bad debt because tenants falling behind and arrears, and taking into consideration both mine and Councillor Lloyd Selby's earlier comments around the cost of living having an increasing sort of adverse impact on our residents, have the officers undertaken any sort of anecdotal investigations in terms of whether damages being being made in council property is a result of poor mental health, or the vulnerability of the adults then that we are trying to support during these difficult times? And I don't expect you to give me the answer, but it from my perspective and reading what, obviously the information that's contained in this report, there is a common link, and that is the political ideology that keeps driving the cost of living crisis is causing further, more and more people into some serious vulnerable situations that we as a council are then having to, look at adapted ways of supporting, and that all has a financial impact on all of us. And the second point as well is in terms of, I suppose, again, re-emphasising the work that the council has done on house building, and I take into consideration the difficulties of COVID, but I note from previous meeting, we talked about sort of expanding the role of apprentices, and is that going to include sort of apprenticeships within sort of where we can pick up where we're picking up the slack then in terms of house building, and if there's any capacity to sort of broaden the scope of what sort of apprenticeships we offer to take into consideration the work that we'll be required to take. And I'll stop there. Sorry, Miles.
No, Chair, I can probably answer both those questions, but what I'll do, I'll let Mike and Nick come in because they'll answer them in more detail than me. My guess is in relation to the damage to properties, there is a link between the people's difficulties and that, but whether we have the data, but I'll my colleagues answer that if you don't mind.
So void properties exist at an end of tenancy. So I guess the rationale there would be, why do tenancies end, or what is, is there a link in terms of the reason for the tenancy ending? It certainly isn't linked to eviction generally, because the council has, all 22 local authorities have signed an agreement with Welsh Government to limit eviction, given the current economic crisis that Wales the UK finds itself in, but local authorities and our tenants find themselves in. So evictions are very, very few and far between. I'm not saying that there won't be an eviction, because if there's extreme antisocial behaviour, as an example, or an unwillingness to pay rather than an inability to pay, let's put it that way, then clearly we would wish to retain those options in our armoury if people aren't paying, and the rest of our tenants, the vast majority of tenants, do pay their rent. So I think the link there as well, money advice was mentioned earlier in an earlier discussion. From that performance stat, 329 tenancies where money advice was given of 6 months after are still in existence. I'd say the major factor and the major driver for us is, and certainly in terms of major repairs of properties, are issues usually related to damp. Now, it could be that we're just on a bad run, and we're coming across a lot of older properties where we've got problems with damp-proof courses or what have you. Or more likely is the fact that all local authorities are taking a very different strategy in relation to damp and condensation issues. And if we do have a construction-related damp issue, best to do that whilst the property is void, rather than to do that when it was tenanted. And I would probably suggest that in years gone by, the balance had gone the other way. Let's get tenants into our properties within a week, and we'll do the work within 30 days or 60 days or 90 days, but then unsettle the tenant then because it's major works whilst they're living in the property. So there's partly that. In relation to why a tenancy's ending, I haven't seen. Nick would do monthly. There's a monthly PI in terms of breakdown of tenancies and reason for tenancies. I can't see that they necessarily, people aren't moving into the private sector because it's cheaper or it's better quality accommodation. I would imagine these are more natural end of tenancies. But Nick, I don't know if you've got a better feel in terms of numerically what that might look like.
Yeah, Mike, our turnover is really slow at the moment. It's lower than it's been pre-pandemic anyway. Our turnover in the Vale was always lower than sort of some of the valleys authorities where we have fewer voids each year, because people typically, when they get a council property in the Vale, they want to keep it. So there isn't so much movement between different tenures, private rented or into home ownership, etc. The biggest reason, and you probably won't be surprised by this, is sadly people passing away. Death is the main reason why tenancies end. As well as that, people going into nursing homes or requiring, not able to move independently anymore, or people kind of moving out of the area as well. So, but death, the last time I looked at the figures, was the biggest reason really, because there are just not other sort of viable options for so many people at the moment. So that was a biggie. But Yeah, in terms of the end of tenancy rate, really. But yeah, what we could do, we haven't done this really, is a bit of an analysis, a bit of a deep dive into the recharge costs and the reasons to see if we can sort of correlate that with some information about maybe arrears or about household incomes, or if there's a pattern in terms of the type of property stock or the areas. That would be an interesting bit of work to do, actually. So, you know, we can definitely take that away and have a look at it.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any more questions or comments?
Councillor Lloyd Selby, I believe.
Okay,
Chair,
well,
has a hand up.
Sorry?
I believe Councillor Lloyd Selby has a hand up, Chair.
Oh, I can't see that. Mind, I have just had a problem with my laptop disconnecting again, so maybe Teams is being silly. Councillor Lloyd Selby, if you'd like to come in.
Yeah, thank you. Just very briefly. Obviously, Welsh Government has finally announced a refreshed Warm Homes Wales programme, which is really welcome in terms of tackling fuel poverty, but critically also providing support for households, picking up the issue you were mentioning, Mike, about things like, you know, houses that are experiencing damp and the problems that brings with it. Now, obviously, we haven't seen the detail yet from Welsh Government in terms of what will be in that programme and what will be outside it. And it's not a programme that council tenants can benefit from, but obviously it is a programme that people in private rented accommodation, that landlords can benefit from. And so I'm just wondering whether or not we have a role in that, in terms of promoting that, to ensure that those landlords who are really struggling with the cost of living consequences and are wondering whether to stay in the private rented sector, provisional get out, you know, do we have a role in that in terms of promoting that programme? You're nodding, Mike, which is again really reassuring.
We absolutely do. It doesn't fall within Miles's area of responsibility. It falls within Marcus's area, but also some of corporate services under Lorna in terms of the energy work that the corporate property team do as well. You're quite right. It is targeted and related to private sector housing. And there is a small subgroup of officers who are looking at the predecessor programmes, but also looking at the future programmes and how do we best message and get the messaging out. We also have the one of those officers is our empty homes officer, and obviously the ability then to target grants to landlords who may be thinking of bringing their property back into beneficial use, but might need a little bit of a nudge in terms of some additional funding then to bring that property up to the various letting standards that would be required under Welsh Government regulation. So yes, you're absolutely right. We do have a key role to play in that regard and in terms of communicating that with the wider population.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And if I may, Chair, just very briefly, if there is a working group looking at that, I think it would be helpful to think about providing a briefing to councillors, because obviously we're often the first port of call in terms of people coming and saying, my landlord's giving me notice, or I've got problems with the condition of my property. I think it'd be really helpful if there was just a briefing provided to us. So when people come to us, if we're running surgeries or just through social media, we can signpost them to that support that, as I say, hopefully will be available early this winter.
I think that's a good idea, and I think in conversations with Mark Thomas, myself, and Marcus, we can get that on a future agenda item.
Yes, please do. Please do. Okay.
Chair,
yeah.
Sorry, Chair. I've put my hand up. It's just a point of clarity.
I was just going to say my team is still playing up. I cannot see anybody's hand up. It was when she was muted on my screen. I literally cannot see anything, so I'm running blind here. Mike, go ahead. I don't know if anybody else has any hands up there. I do apologise.
It's just a point of clarity on the point around the council and what priority it gives, and the particularly in relation to the PAM 18 figure, which was it is showing as a red. It's just to clarify that that's a Q4 performance figure that you can see there. It's not a full year figure. So it's a conversation we'll have with some of our colleagues back in the performance team. Ordinarily, your 4 quarters are 25%, 25%, so on and so forth. So that's a measure against the performance in the quarter. However, what you should be seeing is full year performance, really, against that if I can say it, cumulative figure. We've actually achieved over the year. We've actually achieved the target. So the target shows us 20 per 10,000 households, and the figure is in excess of 26, I believe, just over 26 per 10,000 households. So in terms of the target, I'm not going to say we've smashed the target because that would be wrong, but it's just a point of clarity that otherwise, if you read it just as a Q4, in Q4 there were less affordable units delivered versus the entire year, which was, as I say, closer to 20, just over 26.
Okay, thank you. Mark, I'm going to have to call on you and ask you if anybody else has their hands up, because I genuinely can't see.
Right, no one currently has their hands up, but obviously just to check if members or obviously officers as well got any further contributions.
Okay.
Right, no one's putting their hands up, Chair, no.
Because I can't see it. I don't know what's going on. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time tonight, guys. If there's nobody else got any comments or questions, we'll go to the recommendations. Councillor Lovelock-Edwards, I could
no, Chair, that's
I could see you were waving there.
No, sorry, Chair. I was thinking I was going to say go to recommendation.
Yeah. No problem. I can see you if you move on screen, but if you use the raise hand function, I can't see it at the moment. It's just strange. It's not showing it. Okay, so the recommendations we consider the Q4 performance results and progress towards achieving the annual delivery plan 22-23 commitments as aligned to corporate plan wellbeing objectives within the remit of the committee, and that we consider the remedial actions to be taken to address areas of underperformance and to tackle the key challenges identified within remit of committee, with their views and recommendations referred thereafter to Cabinet for their considerations and approval. Are we happy with those recommendations? Okay,
move the
yes.
recommendations, Chair.
Yes,
okay.
Happy to second.
Confirm,
Okay,
Chair,
wonderful. Thank you
committee
for
a note in those 2 recommendations, yes.
yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. Thank you for putting up with my see, I can't even say the word now. Technology difficulties tonight. It has been most trying, I swear. But thank you very much for coming. Thank you for your time, and thank you to everybody who's given reports. Wonderfully presented, well written, and thank you for you. Thank you to you, and please pass your thanks on to your teams as well. The next meeting is the Wednesday, the 13th of September at 6 p.m. So have a lovely August recess.
Just to say, Chair, we obviously just to confirm there are no items urgent for part 1 or 2 either. Chair,
no, I have no other items. Yeah. I have no other items. So have a wonderful August recess, and I will see you all in September. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good night all.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.